Hey PokéDad fan club, it's PokéDad, and we're back for the second half of the breakthrough cards. Actually, I should say the second third of it, because we'll do one more video after this one, and we'll talk about the trainers. But right now we're just talking about the Pokemon. So I've already done the first video with the Red Flash, so we're going to get right into this one. In Blue Impact, we'll look at Gastly EX, Mega Gastly EX, Mewtwo EX, and Mega Mewtwo, the X version. And then we'll also look at Zoroark Break and Florges Break. As far as the trainers, we're going to get to that in the third video. So let's just get right into this. Pinsir here, the guy always gets overhead toss for some reason. Ends up doing damage to one of your benched Pokemon. I guess I could see that working with the Magikarp Gyarados deck, where you could hurt the Magikarp so that Gyarados' attack gets stronger, but I really don't think that's going to be all that great. Cacnea is a grass type, but he evolves into a dark type, so we'll look at his evolution a little bit later on when we get to the dark types. However, one thing I should point out is since he is a grass type as his basic, that means that he can use the Forest Giant plants even though he'll be evolving into a dark type. So that one could be a quick evolution. Alright, Pansage and Simisage, I already talked about this in the previous, in Red Flash. Simisage has Fire Toss. No, that can't be right. It's got to be something with grass. Grass Toss, maybe. Put three grass energies from your discard pile into your hand. So anyway, all of the Simisage, and all of those guys have the same basic attacks. I don't think there's anything special about any of them. So we'll move right along. Chespin is just an extra, but the Chespin break was in the last set, so we're not even going to really look at this one. Alright, Scatterbug and Spupa and Vivillon. Scatterbug's just the basic. It does have the ability to paralyze the attack, to possibly paralyze, so it could give you an extra turn. Spupa has Protect. This is very similar to like some of the other stage 2s that are grass. But one thing we should remember about this is that they all are grass types, so you could use the Forest Giant plants to evolve them all on turn 1. Vivillon doesn't have its stuff here, and I can't remember exactly what that does. I want to say it has something to do with, I don't know, we may have to look that up in a little bit. We'll just see. We'll move on. I don't think it was anything super major, but we'll look it up. Maybe I'll look it up on Bulbapedia and just see if that comes up. While that's loading, I'm going to just keep going. Alright, Cyndaquil is a fire type basic Pokemon. Tackle does 10 damage, and then Ember does 30. Quilava evolves to Quilava. Mini Eruption, 30 damage, and discard the top card of your deck. If it was an energy, then the attack does 30 more. Alright, and then we get another version of Typhlosion, yeah. And this one, it has the similar attack as it did on one of its last ones. Flare Destroy for 2 fire and a colorless does 130 damage. Discard an energy attached to this Pokemon and discard an energy attached to your opponent's active. This could be very useful, especially if you're playing against a Pokemon that has special energy, and you could discard that special energy. You're going to discard your fire energy, but if it's the special energy, then you can just reattach it right back, so next turn you can do the same thing. So that's a potential one. I've actually also heard of some people that are going to try to build a deck just around the first attack, discard the top 5 cards from your deck, and this attack does 80 damage times the number of energy cards you discarded. So if you could, theoretically, if you could get 5 fire energies on the top, you would hit for 400. That could be pretty cool, but you'd have to dedicate a lot of fire energy to be able to do that. Alright, in the last video I talked about Remoraid, but this is the one that we really want to talk about, and that's the Octillery. I think this will see some play, especially for people that may not have the Shamans. This has an ability, Abyss Hand. Once during your turn before you attack, you may draw cards until you have 5 in your hand. So it's kind of like Delphox. What was the other one that could only do Magnetic Draw that could do 4? This one allows you to do 5. So I see this could be played in some decks, and maybe even multiples of it, so you could do it multiple times. It might be an alternative to Shaman EX. However, I just think the draw power from Shaman is going to be so much more easy to use than to use this, but it might be an alternative for those that are really budget conscious. Alright, we look at Gastly EX and Mega Gastly EX. Alright, Gastly EX has instant, actually has they're missing attack here. The first attack doesn't even do any damage. I think it's like flip a coin, and if heads, they're paralyzed. The second attack does, for a water and 2 colorless, does 50 damage. And if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, this attack does 100 more damage. This might be a place where you could use Battle Reporter. However, Battle Reporter only helps if you have fewer cards than your opponent, so you can draw up to the same number. It doesn't help if you have a lot of cards in your hand and your opponent only has a few. Then you have to either use like maintenance, or you could Ultra Ball down and maybe get down to it. But it seems like it's going to be kind of hard. However, that being said, to be able to hit 150, that would be pretty nice. Though it still isn't really a magic number, you know. I think Mega Houndoom hitting 160 is a little bit easier than Gastly hitting 150 here, and it's a lot more expensive than Mega Houndoom. Mega Gastly, I just don't think this is going to be, it's going to be probably the weakest Mega of all of them. However, it could potentially be solid. Cryomouth does 100 damage for just 3 energy, so the energy cost isn't too bad, because, you know, we've seen some that have 4. If there are 10 or more damage counters on this Pokemon, so which means if they've taken if this Pokemon has taken 100 or more damage, then this attack does 150 more damage. So it would hit 250. I guess in some instances this could be good. Like there's other Megas like Mega Sceptile and Mega Mega Manectric that they have to take 2-hit knockouts on EXs like this on other Megas, and so this could really come in handy, because then you'd be able to take a knockout right back on just about any Mega or even a Wailord, right? So I guess there's some places this could be good, but the fact that it only starts with 100 damage, that kind of seems weak. So it's either like 100 or it's going to do 250. Depending on if he has damage already. Alright, so that's Mega Gastly. It might see some play, though I'm not 100% sure. Simipour is, again, this one is the water one. Again, they all have the Simisage, Simipour, and Simisear, all are similar. Vanillite, Vanillish, and Vanillux. Okay, so Vanillux here has some interesting attacks. Shivering Press here. A Shivering Press, until the end of your next turn, neither player can play a supporter or stadium card from their hands. So if you had Vileplume in play, you could supporter lock, stadium lock, and item lock all on the same turn. which could be pretty strong because then your stadium would not be switched out. And they couldn't play a supporter. So this is kind of like the new Executor from the old, the old Executor, which only hit for 10, but then locked your opponent from playing a supporter. However, the problem is you can't play any supporters either, and you won't have to worry about playing a stadium card because your stadium will be locked if you're the one, if you played it last. So that could be pretty useful, but it only does 30 damage. So you'd have to get some damage modifiers in play, maybe I don't know, poison and a muscle band, and I don't know, it seems like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like a 30 damage is going to be all that, but it might be if you can lock items and supporters and stadiums. Deep Frozen, 70 damage, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. If tails, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. That might see some play too. I don't know. I will say these two attacks allow for some versatility. So, if they have a really small hand, you might not want to do the first attack, but the second attack would paralyze them. So I don't know. And the thing is, if they're item locked with Vileplume, they're not going to play any switches or anything like that. So it's going to be hard for them to get out of the active. So if they get paralyzed, it could be a problem for them. All right, Magnemite, Glittering Guidance. This is the Magnet Zone was in the other set, but Glittering Guidance actually could be quite useful. I think this Magnemite to start off is better because this Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 color less for each Magnemite on your bench. So if you bench another Magnemite, then this one has free retreat. So could be useful. Alright, now we're coming to one of the stars of this set, I think, and that's Gastly, Haunter, and Gengar. And it's actually kind of important to kind of go over all three of them because they all kind of work hand in hand. So Gastly, when you're starting out, you put a Psychic Energy on and you can do Sleep Poison. And this is just similar to Sceptile EX's attack, except it doesn't do any damage. If heads, your opponent is sleep and poisoned, and that poison counter damage will add up. So when we get to Gengar's attack, which you'll see in a minute, will come in very handy. So that actually is very useful. Then Haunter has the ability Gothic Fear. Once during your turn before you attack, when you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may use this ability. Both active Pokemon are now confused. Okay, so you're going to confuse your Haunter, but you'll also confuse your opponent's Pokemon. And if they then attack and they take 3 damage counters, that comes in very handy for later on, and you'll understand why. But Haunter also has an attack, Poison Circle. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. Okay, and this is all coming together for what Gengar does. Okay, now Gengar is, like I said, probably going to be a whole deck. Decks will be built around him. I think he's going to be one of the new archetypes. And even though he's a stage 2, I just see that this deck is going to be very, very powerful. Ominous Fog. Sorry, I got a bug flying around. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and you place 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And then for a Psychic and a colorless, but if you have Dimension Valley, it just goes back down to a Psychic. So we're just looking for 1 energy, basically. If your opponent's active Pokemon has at least 3 damage counters on it, that Pokemon is knocked out. So see how all of these things, poison and confusion, how all of them work together so that Gengar's Creepshow can come in and you can evolve. If you have a Dimension Valley and a Psychic already on, Creepshow comes in and just knocks whatever's out. And this includes EXs and Megas. So you just need 3 damage counters and then Creepshow just finishes it off. I definitely think people will be building decks around this, and it's actually kind of scary because if you're because it only takes 1 energy really, and he's at a number 130 isn't, you know, either they're gonna 1-hit knock you out or they're not. If they're gonna 2-shot you, 130 is a magic number, so that it's probably gonna take 2 shots to knock Gengar out. So it could be really a very strong card, I think. Alright, now we're coming to the other Mewtwo EXs. These are, this is the Mewtwo X version, which uses actually fighting energy. Now, I think this is the Mewtwo that more people are going to use because I think the attacks are a little bit better. The first one is for a double colorless. It just throws 30 damage, but during your opponent's next turn, any damage done to this Pokemon by attacks is reduced by 30. So it does a little bit of chip damage, but then it also protects 30 more damage, which means you probably won't get 1-hit KO'd unless, of course, we're going back into the Mewtwo Wars, and then, you know, you're playing a Psychic type against it. It might somehow knock it out. Psycho Burn, 2 Psychic and 2 colorless. You can reduce that to 2 Psychic and 1 colorless. It only does 120 damage. I don't know. I'm still not sure which one's going to be better. Maybe the other one will be better. But I don't think either of the Mewtwo EXs are going to be all that great. I think really this set is built more around the Megas. Alright, so we looked at the other Mega, the Mega Mewtwo Y. This one is the Mega Mewtwo X. And this one, if you'll notice, actually has to have fighting energy. So you have a Psychic and 2 fighting. Also notice though, since it's a Psychic type, you can use Dimension Valley to reduce it down to just 3 energy costs. But you're probably going to have to use something like Landorus or I would think some kind of energy accelerator. Otherwise, it just seems like this is going to be too slow to get involved because you can't use really any special energies here. So, Vanishing Strike does 150 damage, but if there's a stadium in play, this attack does 50 more damage. And this attack's damage isn't affected by resistance or any other effects on the defending Pokemon. So, it can go through anything. So, it can go through any walls. So, it can go through Beautifly. It can go through Giratina. It can go through trying to think what else can it go through. Aegislash. It can, well, even though I don't know that there's going to be much special energy on here, but it can go through all the walls pretty easily. Just because it's hitting, if there's a stadium in play, it's going to hit 200 damage. So I think this one has some play. I think the other one is probably going to be played more, but I think this one actually has, you know, some situations. You might actually see some of these, some decks playing both. I can definitely see that because depending on the situation, you'll want one Mega Mewtwo over a different one. So, anyway, but I have a feeling the other one's going to be used more. This one might be used more as a tech. So, anyway, guys, that's Mega Mewtwo. And again, we'll build some decks around those to show you what they look like. Woobat and Swoobat, kind of an interesting one here. Not the Woobat, but the Swoobat here has Wave Amplifier, which is for a colorless. So if Dimension Valley is in play, you can actually do this for free. During your next turn, Echo Return does 60 more damage, which is the second attack. And then put a Psychic Energy. Echo Return does 60 damage. But of course, if you've done Wave Amplifier, now it does 120 damage. And then flip a coin. If Tails, return this Pokemon and all cards attached to it to your hand, which means you can do kind of like a Selgor Trevenant type like deck, except that you're only going to have, even with a trick coin, you're only going to have a 75% chance of actually returning it to your hand. So, and with only a 90 HP, it seems like, ugh. I don't know. I think there's better ways to. I think using Trevenant straight up is probably better. I'm surprised we don't see more decks with just Trevenant as the main attacker. I've even considered Trevenant Bats, and I may even build that deck just to see what it looks like. LGM and Behem. Now I want to say that there is a break card coming out for Behem. It's not in this set. It's going to be coming in as a special card. I don't think it was all that great, though. We can look at it if we need to. Attack name obscured. This attack does 20 damage times the number of energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So it could hit pretty hard for just one Psychic. And then Psybeam does 50, and they're now confused. Sandshrew and Sandslash. I'm not sure I've actually had an opportunity to look at these yet. Sandshrew is just the basic. Double Scratch does 10 damage, 10 times damage, flip 2 coins. Sandtrap 20 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat during their next turn. Sandslash does 20 for just a fighting type. And then 3 colorless does 80 damage, and this attack isn't affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects, so that means it can get through walls. I have seen Meloetta, and I think Meloetta combined with another card, which we'll talk about later, might see some play. Let's just talk about it. So Meloetta has a Cell Spin. This one is kind of cool. Attach 2 fighting energies. By the way, this Meloetta is a fighting type. 2 fighting energies from your discard pile to this Pokemon, and then switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. So it's kind of cool because you can then charge up Meloetta for the second attack and then move it to your bench. So they would have to Lysander it up to be able to knock it out, so you'll be able to use it for the next turn, which might mean you could put a Robo-Sub or something else up to kind of be a wall, which is kind of neat. And then by the next turn, Meloetta is ready to go, so you could put a Float Stone on the active, bring that back, and put Meloetta back up. And Prima Rondo, 60 damage, but if this Pokemon has any Psychic energy attached, this attack does an additional 50 more damage, okay? So here's the cool thing about this is, first of all, it's a fighting type, so we've got all the damage modifiers, strong energy, muscle band, fighting stadium, which can make the attack go up. But then there's a Pokemon, and I'm just going to go straight to it. It's a colorless, where is it? Here it is, Smeargle. So we'll go back to where all the stuff we missed in just a moment. But Smeargle has this ability called Recoding here. And once during your turn before you attack, you may switch one basic energy card attached to your active Pokemon with one different type of basic energy card in your discard pile. So if you use Battle Compressor, you could put some Psychic energy in the discard pile. Use this ability to switch one of the fighting types with a Psychic type. And now Meloetta's attack does 110 damage. So that is pretty cool. Then when you throw in, you could have a strong energy on there. You could have a muscle band. Now you're at 130, 150. Add in a fighting stadium. And now you're at 160. So could be very useful. Might even be a good tech card in a deck, but of course you do need the fighting energy. So, oops, I went a little too far there. All right, Cacturn. So we talked about Cacnea earlier. Cacturn is a dark type, and he evolves from the Cacnea. So you could actually use Force of Giant Plants to get him out on turn 1. The first attack could be very good. For 1, Darkness Energy does 30 damage. And then discard a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if you're playing against, a lot of decks now have special energy. You're playing against one of those decks, this card could really come in handy. Pin Missile is going to do 40 times the number of heads you get, and you get to flip 3 coins. So it could do up to 120. But really, even with that first attack, I just don't see that it's going to probably make it into play too much, though it could. Alright, now we're going into one of the break cards. We've got Zorua, Zoroark, and Zoroark Break. And again, this is one of those that I feel really is going to probably be pretty good, because it doesn't have a stage 2 to go through. It only has a stage 1 to go through. So it's like a stage 2. Zorua has Midnight Betting. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Dark Edge does 30 damage and discard an energy attached to this Pokemon. Nothing special there. Zoroark, though, okay, has an ability which is not on here, but I know what it does because it's really good. And then it has Mind Jack. Okay, so let's talk about the ability. Okay, this card is going to see play in competitive play regardless of if the break is good or not. The ability is just it's called Impersonate, and it's very similar to Keldeo EX's Rush In, where you can, if this is on your bench, you can rush into the active, impersonate, I guess is what the idea is, impersonating the active, and he's actually up there. So a Float Stone on him is going to actually allow you to use the same way as Keldeo's Rush In allowed him to, and this will allow you to be able to clear status conditions without having to worry about anything else. So he'll be used for that reason, if nothing else. Mind Jack is actually pretty strong in itself before we even go to the break, Zoroark Break. Mind Jack is 10 damage, but this attack does 10 damage plus 30 more damage for each Pokemon on your opponent's bench. This was designed to be a counter to Raichu, but even more so to Rayquaza, Mega Rayquaza EX. So if Rayquaza has 8 on his bench, this is going to do 250 damage. Alright, and actually there's a lot of people who are using the whole, what do you call it, the Skyfield engine, I guess you could say. They may not even be using Mega Rayquaza, but they love to play multiple Shaymins. And so they've used this Skyfield hoping that you'll switch the stadium, and then they can just throw all their Shaymins in the discard pile, so they don't have to have any of the risk of having a Shaymin. Well, this kind of puts that whole strategy on an end, because if they decide to do that, you can keep the stadium in play for them, and then you can just Mind Jack the active, and if they have 8 on their bench, you're going to be hitting 250 for just a double colorless every turn. So this card could be could be very, very strong, taking out EXs and Megas alike. Now the next one is Zoroark Break, and I'll kind of throw it over so you can see what it's going to look like. I kind of like doing this. This is neat. All right, it adds another attack, and it also adds an extra 40 HP to Zoroark here. So the Mind Jacking and the ability are still in play, but now you have another attack, and it's called Foul Play. For just 1 Darkness Energy, choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon attacks and use it as this attack. So they show a commercial with this, and in the commercial they show they Lysander up Hoopa, and then they use Hoopa's attack, which is does 100 damage to one of your benched Pokemon. And so he uses that to knock out, like, I think I don't remember, something that's 100 damage or less, finishing the game off or something like that. I don't remember if it's a Shaymin or what it is, to be honest with you. It couldn't have been a Shaymin, because a Shaymin only has 110 HP, so it wouldn't have knocked the Shaymin out. But anyway, it's pretty neat because you can then use an opponent's ability. I don't know how much the break card will use. I guess it could be like a 1 or 2 of, but I think the Zoroark will be used for sure. Anyway, let's go ahead and put those on and we'll move right along. Now we're moving into the fairies, which tend to be my favorite. I'm still kind of disappointed though overall with the fairies. Especially since, you know, Aromatisse and the original Xerneas are going to be rotating next September. So we really only have 1 year to use them, and then it's going to be bye-bye to them. This Snubbull and Granbull, though, I think this Granbull can actually see play. It has this attack. Startling Bark, really, I don't think will do much. If heads, choose 3 cards from your opponent's hand without looking, and then look at the cards that you chose and have them shuffle them back in their deck. I guess that could do some, you know, hand disruption. But his attack, Thrash Around, for a Fairy Energy and 2 colorless, can do 120 damage, and the Pokemon is now confused. This is the fairies version of a stage 1 attacker. So if you think about it, if you use evolutions, you're going to have lightning, water, and fire that you can turn Granbull into, and then if he can hit those weaknesses for 240 damage. So that right there could be very, very useful. Now, the only bad thing is the energy cost is, you know, a fairy and 2 colorless. But we'll talk about why that's not going to be too big of an issue in just a moment. It's actually going to be just a colorless cost because the fairy energy cost will be reduced. And we'll talk about that right now as we go into the Florges break. Now, I really like the idea behind this break card. What I don't like is all the other break cards are either just stage 1s, so it doesn't make it as difficult to get them into play, or if they're a stage 2 like Chestnut, you at least have a way to accelerate the process of getting to him. And even other cards like Gallade, which was a stage 2, and Empoleon, which we looked at, which was a stage 2, they can get into play through Archies and Maxies. But the fairies, they don't have any good way to get a stage 2 out. Gardevoir came out last in the last set, and nobody's playing Gardevoir because nobody can get Gardevoir out quickly enough. So we've got a Flabébé, a Floette, and a Florges, and then a Florges break. So now we have a stage 3 fairy that really I just don't see how you're going to be able to get it out. Now Flabébé has a nice little wish: flip a coin, if heads, search for your deck for 1 card and put it into your hand. So it could be kind of like a computer search that doesn't cost you anything. So that could be useful. A useful attack, especially if you like going first. Like if you're going second and Flabébe's your only the one in your active, that could be useful. Floette, Aroma, and I guess I can show some of these. Let's show Floette. All right, so the first attack is 1 fairy energy. Aroma C'est la vie, La Via. Heal 30 damage from each of your Pokemon in play. Okay, but after that, your Floette's going to get knocked out. So, and then Magic Leaf does 20 damage. Flip a coin if this head does heads. This attack, if heads, this attack does 20 more, and heal 20 from this Pokemon. Again, with a 1-hit KO area we're in now, this is still going to get knocked out even if you heal 20 damage. Alright, Florges though. Florges is it is a really good card, and I'm sure there's going to be decks built around it. I'm going to try to build a deck around it. Alright, so it has this ability, and it does stack. So if you could get more than 1 Florges in play, it does stack. Relaxing Scent. The attacks of each of your Pokemon is 1 fairy less. So that Granbull that I talked to you about, if you can get this Florges in play, that Granbull now only attacks for a double colorless instead of a fairy and a double colorless. This Florges itself has a 3 fairy attack, so if you had 2 of these in play, the Florgeses themselves would only attack for 1 fairy energy, which is not too bad. Thinking of this, now your Florges EX can attack for just 1 colorless energy, which means you could actually kind of put it in into a grass deck, because Florges is based around grass types. And fairy types, Florges EX, its attack, but just the fact that you can just attach one card to be again using the attack again is really useful. And then I think it can actually use its first attack, which is lead. That is the Florges EX can lead for nothing now if you have one of these in play. So that could be very useful. The attack on this Florges though is underwhelming. 70 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Now, because of the ability, it would actually go down to just 2 fairy energies, and if you had another one, it would just be 1 fairy energy. But even with a Muscle Band, you're looking at 90 damage, and confusion, not that great. Alright, so that leads us to the Florges Break, and it's the only break card that instead of getting another attack, actually gets another ability. And I was really hoping it would be a really cool ability, but it's a little underwhelming actually. It does gain 30 more HP, so now it goes to 140. But we're looking at a stage 3 here. Compared to Chestnut, who has 190 as a stage 3, Florges only has 140 as a stage 3. It's not very much, and that's the thing. With fairies are already so low on HP anyway that healing type cards don't really help much because they're going to get one hit knocked out. But this Florges Break adds the ability Flower Breeze, and that is once during your turn before you attack, you may heal 30 damage from your active Pokemon and remove 1 special condition from it. So that could actually help in that Granbull also. You could heal the Granbull 30, and then you could remove the confusion that it does to itself. So I think that this Florges and Florges Break were actually meant to be worked in tandem with the Granbull card. But as far as a break card, I'm just kind of disappointed because it's a total supporter break card, and to get it in play is just going to be like, you're going to have to use so many resources just to get it in play. And the attacks of all these fairies are so high anyway that you're reducing them. The attack cost isn't really going to make them that much more viable, you know. So let's look at Xerneas. I will say Xerneas is probably going to be playable, and with the Florges card, it could be even better. So it has 2 attacks here. The first one is called Rainbow Force. And you can see the rainbow tree in the background. The artwork's great. I love Xerneas. I will say that the old Xerneas will be able to Geomancy for free now, which that could be useful if you could get a Florges in. And it can Rainbow Spear for just 2 energies instead of 3. So I will say the Florges has some use, but again, it's dedicating so much space to get it out. I don't know if that's really worth it. Alright, so the Xerneas here has Rainbow Force, 10 damage, but this attack does 30 more damage for each type of your benched Pokemon. So if you could get a Golurk on the bench, and you get another fairy, and you could get a let's say an Evolution or something, I don't know, maybe a Seismitoad and a Manectric and a Dragon or something like that, and you had let's say 6 different types on your bench because the Golurk counts for 2 different types. You could do 180, you could do 190, and just for a double colorless if you have a Florges on the bench. So that could be useful, and you don't even necessarily need to have to use the Sky Field for that if you didn't want to. Power creation for 2 fairy energies and a colorless does 80 damage, and if this Pokemon recovered any HP during your turn, this attack does 80 more damage. So that's again where Florges Break can come in handy. If Xerneas gets hit, Florges Break can heal 30 damage, and then now this attack does 160 instead of 80. So there is some synergy between Florges and the rest of the fairies, but again, I'm just concerned about trying to get everything out, and it just seems like it's going to be very difficult. Alright, we've got an Axus, a Fracture, and a Xerus. This is a pretty good card, and might even be seen in, like, you might be able to put this in multiple decks just because the attacks are colorless that we'll look at in a minute. So Axus, nothing really special. It's just the basic. Fracture has Dragon Killer, which I think is kind of cool. 60 damage, but if your opponent's active Pokemon is a dragon, this attack does 40 more. So he can hit for 100 for a double dragon and a colorless. So not too bad. I should say he can hit an opposing dragon for 100. So you could actually see, like, if people are trying to build up these stage 2s and the stage 1s are going against each other, they could actually knock each other out. It's kind of funny. But when we get to Xerus, which is the stage 2, and again, like I said, so many stage 2s in this set, it makes me wonder if in the future, this is what I'm optimistic about, I'm thinking they're going to come out with some supporter that will really help stage 2s get into play a lot quicker. That's my hope. Dragon Dance. For a colorless, each of your Xerus's attacks do 100 more damage. This effect continues until this Pokemon leaves play, and you cannot apply this effect to this Pokemon more than once at a time. Alright, so normally if he were to be like Lysandered out of the active and another one up to the active, normally the effect would immediately go off. But if you do Dragon Dance just once, this Xerus attacks all do 100 more damage every single turn. Not bad, considering the second attack is called Sharp Fang, and for just a colorless can do 60 damage. Now if you've done Dragon Dance once already though, it's now doing 160 damage. Throw a Muscle Band on and now it's doing 180 damage. The only thing is Dragon Dance, using that one turn of Dragon Dance might allow your opponent to do a one-hit KO. But the cool thing is Xerus is at least stout enough to take a hit. He's got 160 HP. We could also, instead of doing Muscle Band, we could play a Hard Charm on him, and that might make a difference. So he is pretty stout at least, and he might be able to survive a turn. The Dragon Dance obviously is going to lose you time, and I don't know if it'll be worth it in the long run. Now throw in Dragon Pulse though for just a double dragon energy, and if you happen to Dragon Dance, now you're hitting for 230, you're knocking out Megas. So I could see situations where Xerus could just sweep through an opposing bench. Might be difficult to set up, but if it was set up properly, Xerus might be able to just sweep through your opponent. Alright, Doduo, we're not going to go over him because the main set is in the other set. Hoot Hoot and Noctowl, though, I think are pretty cool. Hoot Hoot, Night Call, your opponent can't play any item cards from his or her hand until next turn. This is like a Seismitoad without the damage. But I still think that's pretty cool because you can just use it to kind of stall your opponent. I mean, item lock really stalls everybody. So to be able to item lock on turn 1, even if it's only for one turn, could be very useful. And then it synergizes real well with the Noctowl when it evolves. It has sky high 20 damage. Both players reveal their hands. The attack does 20 times the number of item cards in both players' hands. So if your opponent is stuck with a bunch of item cards because you item locked them the turn before, then you evolve and you show them, you might be able to They might have 5, 6, 7 items in their hand. Maybe not that many, but even if they have 4 or 5, you're going to hit for 100. And this is a stage 1, so add in evolutions, and you multiply 100 times 2, and now you're knocking out EXs and getting real close to megas. So I think you're actually going to see decks around this. I don't think it's going to be a major thing, but I think we're going to see rogue decks based around Hoot Hoot and Knocked Owl. Now, the 3 colorless for Speed Flight, that's not going to be anything special. Though, again, if you have a Muscle Band and Evolutions, it could still take knockouts on EXs. Alright, Teddy Ursa and Ursa Ring. Teddy Ursa is nothing. Ursa Ring here is 130 HP. Drag off, choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and have your opponent switch it with his or her active. This attack does 50 damage to the new active Pokemon. And again, he is a stage 1, so you could actually use this with evolutions. I actually could see this being played, though it is 3 colorless. But imagine a Muscle Band on here and a Jolteon in play, and you just snipe off all their you just snipe off all the Shaymins on their bench. So you drag the Shaymin up, and then since it's a new active, you hit it for 140. And you do that with another Shaymin and another Shaymin, and then the game is over. So I could see this card also seeing some play with Jolteon. Brandish, not so much. We already talked about Smeargle, and that really brings us into the trainer cards. So that's really all I have for the Blue Impact set. Again, there's a lot of stage 2s. I hope there's some supporter cards that come out in the future. In the next video, I will talk about the trainer cards and the supporter cards and the items and the energies and the stadium, the one stadium that came into play. We'll talk about that in the next video. Anyway, this is PokeDad signing off. Hit like, subscribe, and comment below. Talk to you later.